Stay away from her. She's challenging. The manager whispered those 6 words to every new person who walked into our department. Not loudly, not theatrically, just a soft warning delivered with a worried expression, as if shielding them from something dangerous. And they believed her. Every single one of them accepted it without hesitation. For 8 months, I observed her repeat this ritual. 8 months of watching people glance at me, then quickly look away. 8 months of being the woman nobody wanted to approach. The words weren't sharp like a blade. They were slow like a toxin, creeping into every conversation. I would never be included in every project. I would never receive an invitation. Every instance of belonging I'd miss. And the most painful part? I allowed it to happen. I had to allow it because what they didn't realize could either save them or ruin them. And I was the only one who could decide which. Before we go any further into what unfolded next, I need to say thank you. Thank you for being here, for paying attention to something most people would simply scroll past. If this story resonates with you, if you feel what I felt, please hit that like button. Leave a comment telling me if you've ever been the person everyone was warned about, and subscribe because stories like this deserve to be heard. Now, let me reveal who I truly am. My name is Celeste. Not the kind of name that fades into the background, which is ironic because blending in was exactly what I needed to do. I'm 41 years old, and I've spent the past 17 years researching something most people don't consider until it's too late. Workplace ethics. Not the dull kind taught in corporate training videos, the real kind. The type that exposes how good people can commit terrible acts without ever realizing it. I've interviewed thousands of employees, from janitors to executives, and I've discovered patterns that recur in every industry, every country, every kind of organization. 3 years before any of this began, I published a textbook on those patterns. It wasn't meant to become well known. It was simply meant to record what I'd uncovered. But universities started adopting it. Training programs built entire curricula around it. Regulatory bodies began citing it in their company investigations. And suddenly, my name carried weight in professional circles. My maiden name, that is, the name I had published under, the name I had established my reputation with. When I married, I adopted my husband's surname. Not because I believed in tradition, but because it gave me something priceless: anonymity. I could walk into any workplace, and no one would link me to that textbook, to those interviews, to the woman who'd spent nearly 2 decades documenting how organizations fail their people. And that anonymity allowed me to see the truth, the real truth, not the polished version people present to researchers. The messy, complicated, everyday truth that only appears when no one knows they're being observed. So, when I chose to write a second book, I knew exactly what had to be done. I needed to work inside an ordinary organization, not as a consultant, not as an outside observer, but as a regular employee. Someone unremarkable, someone who could witness everything without altering anything. I found a mid-sized firm that handled client services across several industries. Nothing glamorous, nothing horrible, just average. The kind of place where most people spend their entire careers without anything dramatic happening. I applied for a position managing client complaints and employee concerns. Basic work, necessary work, the type of work that gives you access to every fracture in an organization's foundation. During my interview, I met with the director first, Roderick, a man in his late 50s who'd grown the organization from 8 employees to nearly 200. He understood immediately what I intended to do: research, observation, documentation. He approved it without hesitation, with one condition. I would tell my direct manager, and only my direct manager. She would know who I truly was and would help support my work. He introduced me to Pet, the woman who would oversee my daily responsibilities. Mid-40s, impeccably dressed, with a smile that looked warm until you examined it too long. I explained my project to her in his office with him sitting right there. She nodded enthusiastically. "Your secret's safe with me," she said. "This will be valuable research for everyone." I shook her hand. I thanked her. I started the job 2 weeks later, excited about what I might uncover. The first week was normal. People introduced themselves. They explained procedures. They invited me to lunch. I felt welcomed, accepted, like maybe this would be easier than I'd expected. But during week 2, something changed. Conversations halted when I approached. People who had been friendly suddenly appeared busy whenever I asked questions. The group chat that had been active went silent every time I opened it. At first I thought maybe I'd made a mistake, said something wrong, done something inappropriate. I replayed every interaction in my head, searching for the moment I'd ruined things. But there was no moment. There was only the slow understanding that I was being erased from the workplace's social fabric. And I couldn't figure out why. Month 3, I figured it out. I was in the break room slightly earlier than usual when 2 new hires walked in talking. They didn't notice me at first. "Did Pet talk to you about Celeste?" one asked. The other nodded. "Yeah, she said to be careful. Said Celeste doesn't work well with others, that she causes problems." They noticed me then. The conversation died instantly. They grabbed their drinks and left. I stood there holding my reheated lunch, realization washing over me like ice water. Pet wasn't protecting my secret. She was using it, or rather, she was using me. She'd realized that having a workplace ethics expert embedded in her department was dangerous. I could see everything she did wrong, every shortcut, every violation, every moment she put her own convenience above proper protocol. So she'd done the smartest thing possible. She isolated me completely. If no one trusted me, no one would listen to me. And if no one listened, nothing I observed would matter. The isolation wasn't random. It was deliberate, surgical. Pet assigned me every task that exposed me to problems without giving me any authority to solve them. I handled sensitive client complaints, the ones where clients threatened legal action or public exposure. I processed confidential employee concerns, reading reports about harassment, discrimination, safety violations. I reviewed financial discrepancies flagged by other departments, seeing exactly where money vanished or was misallocated. Every single task was a window into something broken, and every single task was mine alone. Nobody collaborated with me. Nobody verified my work. Nobody asked my opinion. I was witnessing everything and influencing nothing. The weekly team meetings became a special kind of torment. Pete would spend 30 minutes praising everyone else's contributions. She'd highlight projects, celebrate wins, acknowledge effort. Everyone except me. When she assigned new projects, she'd hand them to people with half my experience right in front of me, explaining why each person was perfect for the role. High-profile clients went to someone who'd been there 3 months. Complex analysis went to someone who'd never done anything similar before. Strategic planning went to someone who openly admitted they were guessing. And I sat there silent, because speaking up would only validate what everyone had been told. That I was difficult, that I caused problems, that I didn't cooperate well with others. "Don't take it personally," a coworker named Vera told me one afternoon. We'd both been washing our hands at the same time, an accidental moment of closeness. "Pet warned us. She said you don't collaborate easily. It's not about you as a person. It's just your work style." She said it gently, like she was trying to help, like she thought I had no idea. I dried my hands and thanked her because what else could I possibly do? Tell her the truth? Explain that I had literally written the textbook on collaborative leadership? That would sound unhinged, defensive, exactly how a difficult person would sound. So I kept working. I kept watching. I kept documenting. Because here's what Pete didn't understand about research. Isolation is sometimes the clearest vantage point. When you're not part of the social dynamics, you see them more sharply. When people forget you exist, they stop performing. They reveal who they actually are. And what I saw day after day was an organization slowly poisoning itself with small violations that nobody thought mattered. A manager who altered client agreements without documentation. A team lead who approved expenses that clearly broke policy. A supervisor who ignored safety reports because addressing them was inconvenient. None of it was dramatic. None of it was malicious. It was simply careless, careless in ways that would eventually harm real people. Month 8 brought Shiloh, 26 years old, fresh from graduate school, hired to handle client onboarding. She had this spark about her, like she was genuinely curious about everything. She asked questions during meetings, good questions, the kind that made people think instead of just respond. She noticed things others overlooked, and on her third day, she noticed me. I was working through a client complaint when she appeared beside my desk. "Why does everyone avoid you?" Direct, no build-up, just the question. "You'll have to ask them," I said, not looking up. "I did. They said you're difficult." She paused. "But I've been watching you for 3 days now. You helped 4 people solve issues they couldn't figure out. You caught an error in the client database yesterday that would have cost us a huge account. You stayed past 7 last night finishing someone's report because they had a family emergency. None of that sounds difficult to me, it sounds like the opposite." I finally looked at her. Really looked at her. She wasn't trying to be kind. She wasn't trying to fix anything. She was simply confused, genuinely confused about why reality didn't match the stories she'd been told. "What's actually going on?" she asked. I wanted to tell her, wanted to explain everything, but the truth sounded impossible, so I just shook my head. "It's complicated." She studied me a moment longer, then walked back to her desk. I thought that was the end of it, just another person who tried to understand and eventually gave up. But 15 minutes later, she packed her bag and walked out of the building. It was only 2 o'clock in the afternoon. People don't just leave in the middle of the day unless something's wrong. I watched her go and felt a strange flicker of worry. Had I said something that upset her? Had my silence somehow made things worse? Turns out she hadn't gone home. She went straight to the building where our director worked, 3 blocks away. Shiloh walked right past reception, took the elevator to the 4th floor, and knocked on Roderick's door. He had just returned from 7 months of international travel, expanding partnerships around different regions. He barely knew most of the newer hires, but he remembered approving my research arrangement before he left. He remembered exactly who I was and why I was there. Shiloh didn't waste time with small talk. She pulled out her phone and showed him what she'd uncovered during those 15 minutes at her desk. She'd searched my full legal name from the company directory, my married name. But search algorithms are clever. They connect dots, they recognize patterns. And within seconds, her screen filled with my other name, my published name, the name attached to 17 years of work. She showed him my textbook, the one assigned in her master's program last semester. She showed him my speaking engagements, my credentials, the awards from professional ethics organizations. She showed him my university profile where my current research project was publicly listed, Systemic Compliance Failures in Mid-Sized Organizations, a Case Study Approach. And then she told him 3 things that changed everything. First, that I was being deliberately isolated by my direct supervisor. Second, that she had personally witnessed 6 ethics violations in just 3 days that mirrored patterns from my published research. And third, that if I was still gathering data after 8 months, the company was likely in serious trouble. Roderick listened without interruption, then made 3 calls, one to his assistant to schedule an emergency leadership meeting for that evening, one to me requesting my attendance, and one to Pede, ordering her presence. I received the call at 4:30. His voice was calm but firm. "I need you at a leadership meeting tonight. 4th floor, 6 p.m. No explanations, no prep. Just hung up after I agreed. I sat at my desk feeling a sensation I hadn't felt in months. Fear. Not because I'd done anything wrong, but because I knew what awaited. The reveal, the confrontation, the moment 8 months of careful observation would either vindicate or destroy me. I arrived at 5:50. The conference room was smaller than expected, windows overlooking the city, chairs arranged around a rectangular table for about 12. Roderick was there, as was his assistant, HR head, CFO, two senior team leads I'd never met, and Petty, sitting at the far end with a carefully neutral expression, though tension in her shoulders betrayed her awareness that something was happening. When I walked in, her face shifted for a second. Surprise, maybe anger, maybe fear. "Why is she here?" she asked Roderick. "She's not leadership." "She's here because I invited her," he said, gesturing for me to sit. I chose a chair near the middle, not too close to anyone. Shiloh entered moments later, nervous but determined, clearly his ally. Roderick started immediately. "Celeste, I understand you've been conducting research during your time here, research I approved 8 months ago. Can you update us on your findings?" Silence fell. Everyone except Roderick and Shiloh looked confused. Pet appeared stunned. This was the moment I had prepared for since day one. The moment I could either burn everything down or build something better. I documented violations. Names, dates, incidents violating both company policy and regulations. I could end careers right then, justify every lonely lunch, every ignored contribution, every whispered warning labeling me difficult. Instead, I said, "I've gathered enough material for 3 chapters of my next book. Would you like to hear them?" "Wait," Pet interrupted. "What research? What book? What is she talking about? Rodri, you approved this?" "I did," he confirmed. "Before I left for overseas work, I thought I'd briefed you. Perhaps that got lost in transition." He hadn't briefed her. We both knew it. He was offering her a graceful escape to claim ignorance instead of admitting sabotage. She refused it. "This is exactly why I warned people about her," she snapped. "She's been spying on us, collecting information to use against us." "I've been working," I said softly. "Every task you assigned, every complaint, every concern, every discrepancy. I completed it on time, accurately, and yes, learned from it. That was the point." "The point," Pet said slowly, "was to trap us, to document mistakes so you could expose us." "No," I corrected. "The point was to understand how organizations operate when no one is performing for observers. You knew that 8 months ago, when Roderick introduced us." Her face went pale. She'd forgotten that detail, forgotten she had been part of the original conversation. She tried to recover. "I thought you were observing general patterns, not collecting evidence." "I don't collect evidence," I said. "I observe patterns. There's a difference." Roderick leaned forward. "What would you recommend, Celeste, based on what you've observed?" This was it, the fork in the road. I could demand investigations, audits, terminations, present my findings like a prosecutor building a case, or I could do what I had spent 17 years learning, teach. "I recommend education," I said. "A comprehensive training series, 6 sessions, 2 hours each, covering the most common ethics violations I've seen across multiple organizations, including this one, delivered by me using real scenarios from my research. No names, no accusations, just patterns and solutions." "And if we agree?" Roderick asked. "Then I'll ensure this organization becomes a success story in my book, not a cautionary tale." Silence returned. The CFO spoke first. "That sounds like a threat. It's a choice," I corrected. "Every organization I study ends up in my book. How they're portrayed depends on their response when patterns are revealed. Some choose defensiveness, some choose learning. Those who choose learning become examples others want to follow." Pede slammed her hand on the table, not loudly, but firmly. "You can't blackmail us into compliance." "I'm not," I said. "I'm offering what I offer everyone, the chance to fix problems before they hurt people. You can accept it or not. Either way, my research is complete." Roderick turned to her. "You told me 8 months ago that Celeste was a perfect fit for the team. What changed?" She didn't answer, couldn't answer because nothing had changed except her fear of what I represented, someone who saw through every performance, every excuse, every shortcut, and knew exactly what those shortcuts cost. The training sessions began the following week, mandatory for every employee, manager, and leader. 6 sessions over 3 weeks. I never mentioned the company by name, never pointed fingers. Just scenario after scenario drawn from my observations. Here's a pattern, I said in session 1. A leader isolates someone knowledgeable because their expertise threatens authority. The leader frames it as protecting the team from someone difficult. Over time, the team loses valuable knowledge. Performance drops. The leader blames the isolated person. This pattern appears in 38% of workplaces I've studied. People shifted uncomfortably, some thoughtful, some glancing at pede, arms folded, expression blank in the back. Session 2 focused on complaint handling. Organizations assign complaints to trustworthy employees, then ignore them because leadership assumes if the issue were serious, it would be escalated. But the trustworthy person is labeled dramatic or difficult, and their warnings are dismissed. Meanwhile, problems grow until they explode, a pattern found in 62% of workplaces I've studied. By session 3, employees were lining up privately, asking questions about real situations. I listened, asked guiding questions, didn't give advice. Session 4 covered financial discrepancies. Session 5, safety violations. Patterns presented without accusation, sparking conversations with employees who'd been unsure how to act. Through it all, Petty shrank in the back. Session 6 was different. Roderick attended personally, along with the full leadership team. I saved the most critical pattern for last. A leader who suppresses talent to protect their position eventually creates a culture where skilled employees leave, performance drops, and the organization fails. It's rarely intentional. Leaders think they're protecting stability, but they prevent growth. Organizations that don't grow eventually die. This pattern appears in 79% of failed organizations I've studied. Let that number sit, nearly 4 out of 5. The question isn't whether harm was intended, it's whether the organization will learn before it's too late. Talent leaves, always. The only question is quietly or loudly. Pet stood in the back. Everyone watched as she gathered her things and walked out, saying nothing. The session continued. Questions flowed. How to recognize these patterns, how to change, how to build cultures that prevent them. The next morning, Pate submitted her resignation, effective immediately. No farewell, no goodbye, just a brief note to Roderick citing new opportunities. Nobody forced it. Nobody demanded it. She finally understood that staying meant becoming the unspoken example of what not to do. Roderick offered me her position. The department manager role came with full authority and a significant raise. I declined. My research was complete. I had everything I needed for the book. Taking her job would have felt like revenge, and revenge was never the point. But I accepted a different position. Permanent ethics advisor, part-time, remote, essentially a consultant who could review policies, observe patterns, and provide guidance when needed. Enough involvement to ensure changes stuck, not enough to become part of the system I was studying. The consequences rippled in ways I hadn't expected. Shyla was promoted to team lead within a month, demonstrating rare courage, the willingness to ask questions when everyone else accepted answers. She transformed the department in ways Pet never could, instituting weekly knowledge-sharing sessions, creating transparent project assignments, and building exactly the collaborative environment that makes my research obsolete. Other departments requested similar training, and Roderick approved it. Over the next 4 months, I delivered modified versions of those 6 sessions to every team in the organization. Patterns emerged every time. People recognized themselves and chose to change, not because they were forced, but because they understood the cost of staying the same. My book publishes next month. Chapter 7 features this organization, not as a failure, not as a villain, but as proof that organizations can choose learning over defensiveness, as evidence that patterns can be broken when people decide truth matters more than comfort. Real scenarios from my 8 months there, real patterns, real solutions, no names, no identifying details, just the story of how one organization looked honestly at itself and chose to become better. Advanced copies went out last week, and one reviewer, a university professor of organizational psychology, emailed me yesterday saying she would assign my book for her spring semester and specifically highlighting Chapter 7 as the most important case study she had encountered in 20 years of teaching. This, she wrote, is what transformation actually looks like. Not dramatic, not sudden, just steady, honest work. I forwarded the email to Roderick. 2 words. Thank you. Pet found work elsewhere. I know because someone mentioned seeing her name on another leadership roster. I don't know if she learned anything or if she now recognizes patterns in herself. I hope she does. I genuinely hope she does, because the point was never to punish, but to show everyone, including her, that there is a better way. Last week, I visited the office for a quarterly check-in. People greeted me by name, asked about my research, shared problems they had solved using the training frameworks, and Shiloh pulled me aside to say something that made the entire 8 months worth it. We hired someone new, she said, and on their first day, I sent a message to the whole team. Questions are always welcome here, especially the difficult ones. She paused. That came from you, from watching you sit alone for months, asking the difficult questions nobody wanted to hear. Thank you for teaching us that difficult doesn't mean wrong. I think about those 6 words often. Stay away from her, she's difficult. Pet meant them as a warning, a shield for herself against accountability. In the end, they became something else entirely. Proof that the most important voices are often the ones people try hardest to silence, and that the most valuable work often happens in isolation, where truth doesn't have to perform for comfort. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been the person everyone was warned about, or the one doing the warning, I want to hear from you. Leave a comment sharing your experience. Hit that like button if you believe organizations can change, and subscribe, because these stories matter. The difficult ones, the uncomfortable ones, the ones that show us who we are and who we could become. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. And thank you for believing that truth is worth the cost of being difficult.